Okay. Good morning, Shavua Tov. Week before Pesach. It's gonna be the last year until after Pesach. So you're not gonna have anything over Pesach. The Shabbat after Pesach, and then the Sunday. So you'll have so about a week or 2 weeks off. Let's take a look. We are holding on Pei Gimel Amud Bet 83b1, and we brought a Tosefta last week. And in Tosefta, we had a bunch of sins, a bunch of averot that a person did it. He gets hayav mita b'dei shemayim. B'dei shemayim, we saw Rashi said that means that just he dies, not his children. As karet is him and his children. The Ravad said that the b'dei shemayim is at age 60, karet is at age 50. So there was a number of sins that led to hayav mita b'dei shemayim. So we already saw a couple, and we looked to the sources. And today we continue. Bizarre she'achal at truma. So one of them was if a non-Kohen eats truma, the Tosefta said he gets chayam mitabidei shemayim, and that's what the Rambam paskins as well. Okay, but let's take a look at Gemara. Rav said no. Zar she'achal at truma loike. No, he gets makot instead. Rav kahan Rav asi l'Rav. So Rav kahan Rav said to Rav, leima mar b'mita. Don't you mean he gets mita? Okay, take a look at note 2. So note 2 in the article in A3B1 tells us the pasuk right before this pasuk, which was the pasuk that we learned about a Kohen who's tamei and eats truma, and it says that B'shamar Mishmarti v'lo yasu lo chet umetu, and he dies. He desecrated the truma. Ani Hashem mikadesham. And the next pasuk b'chol zar lo yichal kodesh, and no non-Kohen should eat truma. So right after the words umetu, right, about the Kohen who's Taman eats truma and says he dies, the pasuk ends up with a few more words, and then it says the Chol Zayt Lo Yichal Kodesh. So Rav Asher and Rav Kahana say to Rav, the pasuk is next to each other. It's a hekesh, so it shows that he should get mita b'dei shemayim. So Rav answers, no. The pasuk ends off. The pasuk about the Kohen who eats truma when he's tamei ends off Ani Hashem mikadesham, right? Ani Hashem mikadesham. And hifsika inyan, it interrupts the inyan, it interrupts the psukim, and therefore you cannot compare it. But Meitzvei, they challenge Rav. They said, but our Tosefta said, Zara oichel truma chayv mita b'dei shemayim. We had the Tosefta. Sigmar says, Matnita the Rav Karamid. Are you bringing a challenge to Rav from a Braita? Rav Tanahu upolig. Now Rav was an early Amora, but he actually lived during the time that it went from Tanoim to Amoraim, from the time of the rabbis of the Mishnah period to the time of the rabbis of the Gemara period. So he lived in that in-betweener stage, and therefore he had some status as a Tana, and therefore he would be able to argue on a Braita and give his own opinion for it. Halacha is like the Tosefta, though. The Rambam says that a person Zar who eats Truma would get Mita B'dei Shemayim. The next case in the Tosefta was Vizar Shishimesh, if a non-Kohen does the service in the temple. It says Chaim Mita Shemayim Dichtiv. How do we know this? V'Hazar Hakarev Yumat. This is a pasuk in Midbar, and it says that the Zar who brings the carbon, who goes and does the avoda, he will be put to death. B'dei Shemayim. The next case that the Tosefta brought. The Tamei Shishimesh, if a Kohen who's Tamei and he goes to do the avodah. When Rav Achia bar Avin asked Rav Yosef, how do we know a Kohen who's Tamei he gets mita b'dei shemayim? How do we know this? Where we know this from? Because it says there's a pasuk in Vayikra 22:2 that says, speak to Aaron and his children. Israel, and they shall set themselves apart from the holy things of Eloi Chalilu and Shem Koichi. When they're tamei, they should set themselves apart, and they should not make chilul. They shouldn't desecrate the kaddish. Vayalem chilul min truma, and we're going to learn the word chilul over here about a kohen who's tamei to do the avoda. So the chilul of the kohen who's tamei needs truma. And malahal nemita, that pasuk we just saw before that said, right, in note number 2, Umeitu, right? Ki chalaluhu, because he ate truma when he was tamei, and since he should be put to death by mita, by the shemayim. So malahon mita, avkam mita, just like the kohen who's tamei eats truma, he gets mita by the shemayim. So to a kohen who's tamei and does the shemesh, does the avodah in the mikdash, also gets mita by the shemayim. Now the Gemara wants to say, 1 second, why are you making the gzer shava chilul for the chilul to the kohen who's tamei and eats truma? There is a pasuk that says chilul by notar, right? And we already saw this last week as well. If we go back to 83a, note 29, where it says ki et kodesh Hashem chilel, right? When you have notar, which is leftover meat, it also uses the word chilul. So make the gzer shava to notar. Why are you making the kohen who's tamei and eats truma malahal in the car? And just like notar, if a person eats notar, he gets karet, avkan karet. So too here, if a kohen does the avodah when he's tamei, he should get karet, which is more stricter. Him and his children, him before 50, right? So more answers. Mistabra min truma habalumelech. It makes more sense to learn it from truma. Why? Because there's more comparisons. Shikain, guf. They're both dealing with the body, right? By the kohen who's tamei and eats truma, and the kohen who's tamei and does a shimesh, it's both the kohen's body who's tamei. It's his guf. Tamei, and it's both that in both cases dealing with tamei. They're both not pure. Mikvah, they both become pure through mikvah. And berabim, the word chilul is a lashon rabim in both cases, where it's not the same true with noitar. Noitar, it's not the body, it's the meat. Okay, it's not that the noitar is tamei, you're not allowed to eat it. And no matter how many times you take the noitar to the mikvah, it's not going to help. And there's no chilul b'lashon rabim by the notar. Other Rabbi says, well, maybe no. Learn it from notar. Shekain what? Kodesh. Right, the kohen who's tamei is going to do the avodah. He's dealing with karbanos. Noitar is a carbon, right, from a carbon. Pinim, they're both inside the mikdash. Pigul, since they're karbanos, they have the dinam of pigul. I'm a noitar, and you have the dinam of noitar by karbanos. Mara says true. You have also seems to be an equal amount of comparisons. But chilul derabim adif. When you have the gzer shava where the word is more similar, right, and they're both b'lashon rabim, learn it from that one. Therefore, kohen who is tamei and does the avodah in the mikdash should be compared to the case of a kohen who's tamei and eats truma, because in there both of them is used lashon rabim, chilaluhu, chilul. It's used in the lashon of rabim. Okay, the next case that was brought down in the Tosefta was a tfil yom shishimesh. So this guy is tamei. He goes to the mikvah during the day. And part of the lach is he has to wait, the kohen, he has to wait for nightfall to fall before he can come tahar. And he doesn't wait. And he goes to the mikvah, and before the nightfall falls, he goes into the mikdash and he starts to do the avodah. He starts to do service there. And we said that person also chayav mitav b'dei shemayim. But no, how do we know this? The Tanya was talking about the remez litzvul yom shim over chilul minayin. How do we know if Tzvul Yom does the avodah that he did chilul and he gets chayav mitav b'dei shemayim? Talmud Leimer. There's another pasuk. This pasuk is in Vayikra 21:6 that says what? They shall be holy unto their God, and they shall not profane it. What it means, don't come tamei to do the service. But I already had a different pasuk a minute ago when Vayikra 22. So why do I have a second pasuk? It cannot be talking about he's actually tamei and he does the avodah that afkalanu min vayinazru. You learn it from the pasuk of Vayikra 22. So Tenu in Yelet for Yom Shishimesh. This pasuk that seems to say the same thing, that he can't be tamei, must be talking of Tvul Yom, someone who did go to the mikvah, but the nightfall didn't fall yet. And we're learning Chilul Chul Mitruma because it's related to tamei and it's related to the Chilul of Truma. So here we go. A kohen who went to the mikvah, didn't wait for nightfall, is also chayev mita b'dei shamayim. The next case that the Tosefta brought was chusar begodim. If a kohen does the service and he's missing one of his clothing, the kohen hedge has 4, the kohen gadol has 8, and he's out of uniform. All right, he doesn't have. He's missing his belt, missing his hat. I don't know, whatever he's missing. Chusar begodim and alon. He's chayev b'dei shamayim. How do we know this? Amar bi Abahu, Amar bi Yochanan. And some say in the name of Lazar of Shimon. What does it say? There is a pasuk. Okay, the pasuk says v'chagarto tom avnet. Okay, just let's find the pasuk into Torah Shalom on the Hebrew side on the left margin. Zion, the full pasuk. V'chagarto tom avnet. Aaron Ivanav. V'chavash lehem migbaot. Right, put on the belt, put on the hat. V'haita lehem kuhuna. And now they should be kohanim. So what does it seem to be saying? That when the begodim are on them, they are kohanim. When the begodim are not on them, they're not kohanim. And it's implying Bizman should be the when the clothing is on them, that's when they're kohanim. Ain bigdam aleim, ain kahunatam aleim. If their begadim are not on them, then they don't have the kahuna on them. V'havalu zarim, and they're like non-kohanim. V'omamar zarshishim eshemita. And we already learned that a non-kohen who does the service is chayimita b'dei shamayim. So a kohen who's missing his beged is not considered a kohen. Now this is only to do the service. He is considered a kohen to do birkat kohanim, which he does every time in the shul, and other things like that, but truma and stuff like that. What this means here is that in the avoda, in the service in the mikdash, he has to have his clothing on in order to do it, and if not, he's considered a zar, and he is chayimita b'dei shamayim. Sometimes you have to make sure that you are in uniform. Umchusa kapara. Umchusa kapara. This is the case of a person who's tamei, went to the mikvah, night fell, but his din, like Tzayra and others, that they need to wait till the morning, right, and then bring a carbon. So let's say this is a kohen who needed to bring the carbon the next morning. So he went to mikvah, he waited the night, and he had to bring the carbon the next morning, but he goes to do the avodah before he brings the carbon. Okay? And the Tosefta said he's also chayiv mita b'dei shamayim. And now, how do we know this? Amar Rav Huna Damakra. V'chiper aleya hakohen v'tahira. Oh, that's how we know this. And it says by the woman who gives birth. Right? Let's parse parsha. That's real. Then it says over there that she's a tzvul and she has to bring the carbon. And it says when she brings the carbon, then she becomes pure. Tahara. Miklad she tamea, which means until she brings the carbon, she's considered tamea. We already learned and we learned that if he's tamei and he does the service, right? And you have the pasuk there. He gets chaya mita b'dei shamayim. So a kohen who needs to bring his carbon is considered still impure until the carbon is actually brought, and therefore he'll be chaya mita b'dei shamayim if he did the service in that state. Shelo rechutz yadayim v'raglayim. The next case that the Tosefta brought was if a kohen didn't wash his hands and feet in the kior, and he did the service. He said chaya mita b'dei shamayim. But now, how do we know this? Because it says they shall wash with water and not die, right? So they have to wash. If they didn't wash, they chayv mita b'dei shamayim. Next case under the Tosefta was Yishtei Yayin, a kohen who drinks wine, and he does the service. It's chayv mita b'dei shamayim nichtiv. How do we know this? It says Yayin ve'sheichar al tesht. Don't drink wine or intoxicating beverage, right? And the pasuk continues. The pasuk continues. Torah Shalom Yud. Yaim shech al tesh ato v'necha itach v'vor v'molamoed v'loy tamutu. You won't die. So you see, if you drink wine and you can do the service, you're chayv mita b'dei shamayim. The next case that the Tosefta brought was ufrei rosh. If a kohen does the service and he has here that wasn't cut for 30 days, right? For over 30 days. The Kanam shall not have their head shaved, or they should not grow it long. And it says, what's this pasuk? This pasuk is in Ezekiel, it's in Yecheskel, right? So it says, in Torah the next part said, don't drink wine. So says our Gemara, Itkesh Perua Rosh Shtuya. Yecheskel in his Navi compares long hair to the Yayin. Ma Shtuya Yayin B'mita. And we know from our Torah, right, that tells us in Vayikra that a kohen who drinks wine and does the avodah is chayv to the shemayim. So Aprei Rosh B'mita. So to a kohen who does service with a here that's not been cut for 30 days, is also chayav mita b'dei shomayim. Then the Tosefta said there were a couple of cases where it's still a sin to do the service, but they're not chayav mita b'dei shomayim. Aval arel onen yoshev ba'azhara. And arel, a kohen who doesn't have a brit milah, and he doesn't have brit milah halachically acceptable. Doesn't have brit milah. He had two brothers who died from the brit milah, so he's not allowed to have brit milah, but he's still not allowed to do the service. It's a warning. He doesn't get mitah b'dei shomayim, but he's not allowed to do it. Onen, a person has a close family relative on the day of the death, and he does the service. Also, it's not high mitah b'dei shomayim, but it's not allowed to do. Yoshev, or if a kohen does the service sitting, can't do it. He has to stand. If he did it, it's a warning, but he doesn't get hayam mitah b'dei shomayim. He doesn't get mitah b'dei shomayim. Now, aral minalon. Where do we know that a person kohen doesn't have a brit milah? He's not allowed to do the service. Amram Chizda, davar is inventory Moshe Rabbeinu lo yimadnu. You didn't learn from Moshe Rabbeinu. Ad shebo Yecheskel v'Muzi v'limadnu. Yecheskel v'Muzi taught us to us. He said, "Kol bein necher oral leiv, ve'oral basar lo yavo mikdashi l'sharteini." So if they have oral leiv, which is a foreskin on their heart, which means they're not listening, or al-basar, they have an actual foreskin on their skin, right? Lo yavo el mikdashi l'shartein. They cannot come to do the service. So it's an azhara. It is a warning. Okay, we'll see if he gets makot or not in a moment. We'll take a look at the Rambam, but let's do the other two cases and then we'll look at the Rambam. Oynein minalan. Whatever is an oynein, he does the service. He's not going to do this. Why do we know this? We have a pasuk by Kohen Gadol. This is by Kohen Gadol. Kohen Gadol, his family relative died. He's not allowed to go out. If he goes out of the mikdash, he's desecrating HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Right? So he's not allowed to go out. So this is implying that only a Kohen Gadol can't go out, but a Kohen needs to go out. A regular Kohen, if a family relative died, and if he didn't leave, then he did the service. That is a chilul. So two sides to the coin. Kohen Gadol leaves, that's a chilul, so he has to stay. The Kohen Hedget stays, that's a chilul, he has to leave. So, therefore we know it's azhara. Why are we saying it's just an azhara, it's a warning? Let's say it's chilul mitruma, and here it says chilul, there it says chilul, so it's chai mitu de shemayim, malal halam mitu de shemayim, kam mitu de shemayim. Where it says, no, you can't say it. Mikta gufa, does the pasuk talk about a regular kohen? No. They klal kate talk about a kohen gadol, and we learn about a kohen. Have a davar habam in a klal. The chol davar habam in a klal ain't done noto b'gzeira shava. Right? You cannot make gzeira shava if you're implying something from the pasuk. Right? If you're learning a halacha from the pasuk, from an implication of the pasuk, you cannot do gzeira shava to that. So the word, it does say chilul there, but it says it by a kohen gadol who does leave. Then he's making a chilul. You're saying a kohen hedjin must leave, and if he doesn't have the chilul, you can't do gzeir shavah chilul and say it's chaim to the shemayim. Therefore, it's just an azora. It is a warning. Yoshev minalan. I don't know about a kohen who sits and does the service. That is also not allowed. Amrav Rava Amrav Nachman Amrikra ki boy bachar shem lekecha mikol shavatecha la'amod le'sharet. Right, a pasuk in Devarim. You have to stand and do the service. La'amid b'charti v'lo d'shiva. I selected you Kohanim to do the service standing and not sitting. So what punishment, if any, do a Kohen who is uncircumcised, a Kohen who is an Onin, or a Kohen who is sitting? What is the dinim? So let's take a look at the Rambam. The Rambam writes, the legal status of an uncircumcised priest is like that of a zar, like a non-Kohen. If he performs temple service, he's flogged, but he's not reliable to receive the death at the hand of heaven. So you see, if a Kohen is an oral, he gets makot according to the Rambam. Rashi would say he doesn't get makot, but Rambam says he does, but not mitah b'dei shemayim. An oynein. What about an onein? Okay, an onein, a priest on the first day of mourning, may not perform temple service. If he does so, he does not get makot. The yoishev, A kohen who does it sitting, right? It's not allowed. He does not get makot, as because he's just not fulfilling a positive mitzvah. The mitzvah says to stand and serve. It doesn't say do not sit. Therefore, since he's sitting, he's nullifying a positive mitzvah, but he's not fulfilling a negative commandment. He's not doing the negative commandment. Therefore, he doesn't get makot, says the Rambam. Okay, so that's the dinim on that. Let's move on to the next case here. So we're on 84A1. The next part of the Tosefta was about a Baal Mum. A Baal Mum is a kohen who has a blemish that he's not allowed to do the avoda. Right? He does the avoda. What's the story? So Rebbe, to the Nasi. I remember Mita B'dei Shamayim. He gets Mita B'dei Shamayim. The Chachamim oimrim vaz hara, but the Chachamim say no, it's just a warning. Okay, what's the actual halacha? Before we go through the Gemara, what is the Rambam saying? Blemished priest who performed the temple service has done chilul, and he gets makot, but not midah b'dei shamayim, right? So the Rambam paskins like the Rabbonim, like the Chachamim, that it's an azara that he gets a warning and he gets makot, but it's not chayam midah b'dei shamayim. Now, why does Rebbe actually say it's chayam midah b'dei shamayim? My time of the Rebbe. What's the reason the Rebbe? The Rebbe says, Achel parochet lo yavo. Okay, what is this? Let's go to the notes. Okay. Ve'el mizbeach lo yigash imumboy v'lo yichalel et mikdoshi. So the pasuk is talking about a Baal Mum, and it says he should not go and do it. V'lo yichalel, and he uses the word yichalel. Oh, v'yalav chilil mitruma. Wherever he makes the Gzer Shava from Truma, the kohen who's tamei eats Truma, we saw the pasuk says he should be killed. B'dei Shamayim, right? They make Gzer Shava chilul. Ma'alahon mita af kam b'mita. So too, a kohen who's a Baal Mum also gets mita. Gemara says v'neilev chilul minotar. Why are we learning it from Truma? There's chilul by notar, and compare it to notar instead, and gets karet. Not mita b'dei Shamayim according to Rebbe. Ma'alahon mikaret af kam b'karet. Mar says Mistabra and Truma of the Melech. It's better to learn from Truma. Why? She came Pasul Gov, me Pasul Gov. Because by Truma, the Kohen is Tamei, so he has Pasul Gov. His body is the problem. And so too over here, he's a Baal Mum. His body is a problem. Whereas by Notar, the body is not the problem. Kohen's body is not the problem. It is the meat that's the problem. Whereas it's Adarabba. The Notar Melech. Rather learn it from Notar. Right, chicane, because here it's a Baal Mum doing the service, right? And so it's Kodesh. We're dealing with Karbanos. Pnim, we're dealing inside the Mishkan. Notar is from inside the Mikdash. Pigul and Noitar, they're both Karbanos. Whereas a Kohen who's coming each Truma is Kodesh, but it's not Karbanos Kodesh, right? Whole different level. It's a much lower level, so it's not comparable enough. Gemara says, true, there are more comparisons to Notar than to Truma, but as another place you can learn from Ela, Mitame Shishimish Gomar. Learn it from a Kohen who's Tamei and he does the Avoda, right? Because now Psul Gup and Psul Gup, they're both Tamei, right? The Psul Gup, the Kohen who's Tamei does Avoda is problem with the body. Baal Mum, the problems with his body. Kodesh, and they're both dealing with Karbanis. Pnim, they're both inside the Mishkan. Pigel, they're both could have happened Pigel because they're dealing with Karbanis. But Noitar, it could be Noitar. So Kodesh Pnim Pigel Noitar, Kodesh Pnim Pigel Noitar. So they're more comparable. So therefore, Rebbe says it's comparable to Kohen who's Tamei and does the service, which is Chai Mita B'dei Shamayim, as we read and proved before. And that's what Rebbe says. What he says for Rabbanon, and why did the Rabbanon they don't say this? Amakra, because the pasuk says bow. What's pasuk? Pasuk about the kohen who's tamei each truma. It says Shamru Mishmarti below Yisrael of Chet Umetu bow. Right. So look at note 20. The word bow, because of it, is restrictive, implying the penalty of death applies to this kohanic violation, eating truma while tamei, but not to some other one. This gives us exegetical cause to exclude from the penalty of death certain kohanic that would otherwise be derived from truma to be subject to the penalty. The rabbis take this exclusion to refer to a blemished kohen who serves, because it's more logical to assume the exclusion refers to violations that are not truma related. right? If a Kohen is Tameh and he does the service, that's comparable to a Kohen who's Tameh and eats Truma. But a Kohen who's a Baal Mum is not Tameh related at all. Therefore, it's Bo, it's this cases of Tameh and not the cases of Baal Mum. The applies only has such Tumah related violations as a Kohen who performs sacrificial service while he is Tameh, or it's Tfilyah, but not a blemish Kohen, right? That's the Sharan and others. Okay. So therefore, the rabbis say the word Bo excludes the Baal Mum. Okay, the next case that the Tosefter brought, Hezid b'mi'ilah, Rabbi Omer b'mitav. Someone b'mezid on purpose. He uses stuff that belongs to the mikdash. So Rabbi says he gets a mitav d'shamayim. The Chachamim say it is a warning. Let's see what the Rambam says la'alacha before we go into the Gemara. The Rambam says anyone who intentionally misuses hektish is getting makot. Okay, it's not mitav d'shamayim. So again, the halacha is like the chachamim, right? Like the rabbim, and not Rabbi Yehuda Anasi. But let's see. My time of the Rabbi. What's the reason, Rabbi? Amrei Yamar chet mitruma. Oh, it says over here, nefesh kitim o ma'al v'chata b'shkaga mikodesh Hashem. Note 21. It says chet, right? It says a person who does milah, and it says by the kohen who eats truma when he's tamei. Avlo yasu olav chet. So make there shava chet. Mahalan b'mita avkan b'mita. Just like by kohen who eats truma when he's tamei, he gets mitzvah d'shamayim. So too, a person who misuses hekdesh gets mitzvah d'shamayim. But Rabbanan Amar says no, not comparable. Amakra bo, right? Dealing with tamei stuff. Bo below b'meila, not with meila, and therefore the Rabbanan say he gets a makot and not mita b'dei shamayim. Okay, as we come closer to the end of the parak, we go back to our Mishnah. Our Mishnah said, Zar Sheshimesh, right? A Zar who does the service. We saw he gets Mita B'nei Shemayim. But in our Mishnah, we had a Machlokin. That's what the Sefta and everything got involved. But Zar Sheshimesh Migdash, right? What was it? Rabbi Kiva says he gets Chenik. And the Chum say he gets Mita B'nei Shemayim. We pass Mita B'nei Shemayim. But Rabbi Kiva said he gets Chenik. What is the Machlokin? So Tanya was done in a Braita. Rabbi Shmuel Aimer. Rabbi Shmuel says, Nemar kan v'hazar hakarev yumat. It says a zar who does the service, he is killed, right? He's put to death. What Chachamim understand it to mean mitzvah d'shamayim. But v'nemar lahalon, and it says kol hakarev el mishkan Hashem yamut. By the story of Korach, after the story, people came to Moshe and said anybody who comes close to Hashem is going to be killed, right? And what were they talking about? By Korach, how did all his followers die? They died from heaven. No one came and actually killed them. They died b'dei shamayim. So kam b'dei shamayim. So you have Gzeir Shava yumat to yamut. Korach's story to over here about the zar who does the service, and therefore b'dei shamayim. Rekiva says nemer kan v'hazar hakarav yumat. It says over here the zar who does the service is put to death. Nemer lahalan, and it says over there v'hanavi hahu ochayl machalom hahu yumat. If a navi comes and says, serve the Zara, you have to put him to death. What type of death? Malahalam b'skila. You have to put him to death through skila. Kan b'skila. So to here, Av kan b'skila. Yochanan Nuri says, no, malahalam b'chenik. Just like over there, the Navi who says, serve the Zara, you give him chenik. Av kan b'chenik. So to whoever in this case of a Zara does the service, you give him chenik. So the Gemara says, okay, there's a three-way machlok. There's three machlokas. There's two machlokas. Right? You have the first machlokas of the Rabbanan, which is Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva, which is Mita B'dei Shamayim, or you put him to actual death. And then you have the Mechlok Rabbi Akiva, seems to be on Yochanan ben Nuri. Do you give him skila, or do you give him chenik, if you're actually putting him to death? So the first question is, what's the Mechlokas between putting him to death or to let Mita B'dei Shamayim? Whereas Rabbi Shmuel it says let Mita B'dei Shamayim, whereas Rabbi Akiva says Mita B'dei Adam, right? So Rekiva Savar Donin Yumat Meyumat. They ain't done in Yumat Meyamut. Rekiva said if you have choices to make Gezel Shava, you should make Gezel Shava for more similar words. Rabbi Shmuel, you said Vazar Karev Yumat. Compare it to the case of Korach, where it says Hashem where El Mishkan Hashem Yamut. And then it comes close to Mishkan Hashem, will be put to death, right? Yamut and Yumat and Yamut, although they're similar words, they're not exactly the same. I rather compare it to the Navi who says serve the Zara, because there it uses the word Yumat. And you hear by the Zara who does it also uses the word Yumat, right? Rabbi Shmuel says, Rabbi Kiva, very nice, give the words more match, but done in Hedjat Mehedja. Learn the commoner from the commoner, right? The guy is a Zar, he's doing the service, learn it from another commoner who went and tried to do the service, and it's Mitzvah Shemayim. They ain't done in Hedjat Min Navi. But don't learn a commoner from a Navi who says serve the Zara, right? The Navi says serve the Zara, that's very bad. Therefore, he gets skill or chenik. Rabbi Kiva says, no, he's not considered a Navi. Since he tried to make people do it by the Zara, he is the biggest commoner, the biggest non-Navi that could exist. So that's the machlokes. Yumat, Yamut. Can you learn it that way? Should you focus on the commoner? Okay, that's the machlokes. Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva. Now, what's the machlokes? Rabbi Akiva and Yochanan ben Nuri. Why does one say skila, Rabbi Akiva? And why does Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri say chenik, strangulation? Really, it's a machlokes Rabbanon. The Tanya Navi shadir b'skila, right? The Rabbanon saying Navi who makes people do bazar b'skila. Shimon Omer b'chenik. Shimon says b'chenik, and that's the machlokes Rabbi Akiva in machlokes Rabbi Shimon and the Rabbanon. But Umar says 1 second. How time we learned in our Mishnah? Rabbi Akiva, I remember chenik. Our Mishnah said Rabbi Akiva said chenik. The Brighton says Rabbi Akiva said skila. You tell me that's machlokes Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, which is machlokes Rabbanon and Rabbi Shimon. But our Mishnah says Rabbi Akiva said chenik, not skila. The Gemara says trade Tanoim Rabbi Akiva. Two rabbis, two students of Rabbi Akiva, two Tanoim. They learned from Rabbi Akiva, and the had a machlokes is what Rabbi Akiva learned. Matita Rabbi Shimon Rabbi Akiva. Our Mishnah is Rabbi Shimon, and in the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Shimon, who's a student of Rabbi Akiva, remember Rabbi Akiva taught that he gets chenek. And Braita Rabbanan Rabbi Akiva. The Braita is the rabbis, and they learned from Rabbi Akiva that it was skila. So machlokes what Rabbi Akiva seemed to have said. Allah l'maisa, we learned that Azar Shishimesh is Chai Mita Bidei Shamayim. Hadran Alach Eluhen Nisrafin. Hadran Alach Eluhen Nisrafin. Hadran Alach Eluhen Had Nisrafin. So we finished the 9th parak, and we finished the second volume of the Art Scroll, right? It's really one big Masechet, but the Art Scroll split it up into 3 books, and we already finished the second one. So Be'ezrat Hashem, we'll start the third one after Pesach.
Mazel tov.
Mazel tov, mazel tov. We're almost there. Another year. All right. Tada rabah.